We all make dumb decisions in life, but in this case, I was stupid. Very stupid. I arranged to meet a guy off Tinder, but because of my heightened anxiety about driving, I arranged him to pick me up outside my place. I had been talking to him for a few weeks at least, but that's not redeemable, and I know that. The choice I made on this day could have ended me, but thankfully I'm still around to tell the tale. The guy picked me up in his car and told me he planned to take us out for sushi. I love sushi, so I thought, great. He put in the name of the restaurant into his GPS and we were off, making pleasant conversation on the way until I started seeing woods when I looked out my window. I felt very confused. We were supposed to be going to town, not into the wilderness in the middle of nowhere. Fear hit me hard then. He said, "I swear the GPS is taking me through here. I didn't choose this path. Please, just get us back to civilization," I said. My eyes were wide and I could have looked like a deer in headlights. His face was really apprehensive, so he must have known that I was scared completely. OMG, I thought to myself. I should have just conquered my anxiety about driving and met him somewhere public, or better yet, not met with this guy at all. What was I thinking? I'm going to get murdered here in these woods. I tried checking my phone to see if I could assist him with the GPS, and that's when he said those spine-chilling words. "There's no signal out here." I remember just thinking to myself, trying to look calm, don't let him think you suspect he's onto something, but man did I feel terrified. The tips of my fingers were cold while I was simultaneously sweating. If he was going to kill me, part of me wanted him to get it over with so I wouldn't be left in anticipation. His forehead was perspiring. He kept saying, "I swear, I'm not doing this. I'm trying to get us back on the route to the sushi place." I said, "I don't care about sushi anymore. Get us to a gas station, anywhere with people at this point." He said, "I don't have a shovel or weapon in my trunk or anything if that's what you're thinking," which did a little to calm my nerves. We finally reached the restaurant after what felt like an eternity. I'd never been so scared in my life. I didn't have much of an appetite, and I was physically trembling when we arrived. But I figured he didn't kill me when he had the chance, so I thought it was safe now to continue our date. I already planned to take an Uber home because I didn't want to go through that experience again. I was shocked out of my mind when he asked, "So when do you think we'll have sex?" I nearly choked on a piece of sashimi. What? I didn't know where this was coming from, and I didn't know how he could ask something like this after a first date, when he literally saw me as pale as a ghost just moments ago. "You know, like how long you will make me wait? A day? A week? A month?" I stared at him, dumbfounded. I couldn't respond because I was utterly speechless at this point. "Well, I can't wait a whole month, I'm telling you now," he said. I didn't say anything, and the rest of the time was insanely awkward. I said goodbye as I took my Uber home, and only seconds after my driver pulled out of the restaurant parking lot, he texted me saying that he doesn't think it will work out for me because he needs a girl with a higher libido. I didn't argue, I just texted back a simple "okay," ready to be done with this man. When the Uber driver drove me home, he did not take me through the wilderness pathway of a potential murder site. He took me home through streets, other cars, lights, the sweetest scene to my immense relief. I couldn't help but wonder why my day had taken me through an hour drive through the wilderness to get to the restaurant, but it only took the Uber driver 15 minutes to get me home from the same exact location. The whole thing was chilling. I don't know if my date planned on anything sinister or if it was an honest mistake, but I'm glad I made it out alive. I learned a tough lesson that night, one that I shouldn't have already known but I foolishly ignored for some reason. Don't let strangers from a dating app pick you up in their cars. I'm a 21-year-old female, and this story took place when I was around 11. I remember this day clearly because it was the first time I was ever allowed to walk to school and back by myself. Up until the age of 14, I lived in what we thought was a safe place in Chicada Country, New York. Everyone knew everyone. If you thought you would get away with something, then be prepared to have your ears abused by the time you got home. There was this one day, though. It was a cold winter day, and school unfortunately was still open, so all the neighborhood kids had to walk through knee-high inches of snow just to get to school. It took me longer to leave the house as I was used to walking with my older sister to school since she knew the routes better than me. I always used to make fun of her for being paranoid and taking different routes every day from school, but after that day, I knew that was what saved my life. As I was waiting by the door to leave, my mom came up to me and told me that I should ride with her to drop me off because my sister was too sick to go today. Being a brat, I made a big deal about walking by myself because I was almost 12 years old and all my friends' parents let them walk alone. She looked at me for a long while, then told me to make sure I pay attention to cars. I got hit by a car and almost died when I was 9, so the worry that showed on her face was well warranted. Hurriedly nodded and headed out the door to go to school. My sister didn't like to dilly-dally, so she was always in a rush to get to school early, but seeing as it was just me, I thought it would be a good idea to take my time. I would play in the brown slush that was left on the side of the road and even make funny-looking snowballs to see how far I can throw them. Halfway to school, I noticed a white van following behind me. Being the playful child I was, if I had not been bending down to make another snowman, I wouldn't have noticed it slowly creeping up the street. I told myself I was being stupid, but continued more hurriedly to school. Once I got to school, I took a quick glance over my shoulder and saw the van a few feet behind me. It wasn't until I was on the school grounds that it drove fast by me. I thought it would be the end of that, but throughout the day I would stare out the window. The van would be there. I assumed that it never really left, just parked. Many adults would try to convince me years later that it wasn't the same one, but I knew it was. This van had a bright yellow smile emoji sticker on it. I couldn't see who was in the van, but through the tinted glass, I knew they could see me. It was now the end of the day, and I wasn't ready to go home. It was too late to call my mom because she was at work and my sister was homesick. I had to suck it up and start walking home. I tried to blend in with the group of kids, but most of them were car riders, and the others didn't live near me. Remembering what my sister told me, I took another route home. I didn't memorize this route clearly, but I decided anything was better than being spotted by that van. I made it to my main street but realized my mistake too late. The route I took led me back to the main street where I walked to school. Hidden behind a row of cars was the white van with the smiley emoji sticker. I tried to stay calm and walk past, but once I heard the van door slightly click open, I ran. I could hear the rush of 2 pairs of heavy footsteps fall behind me. They were getting closer, so I did what any normal kid would do. I would cut corners. I cut into someone's backyard until I was directly inside of my house, and forced myself into the thick snow to make it to the door. My heart was racing, not because I was running, but because I could still hear them behind me. I made it to the door and banged with all my might until someone came to the door. My sister looked confused, but one look at my face and she pulled me inside and locked the door. The van was still outside. Truthfully, it stayed out there till my brother came home. Me and my sister don't talk about it, but we both knew how close it was to me going missing. I haven't thought of this incident in years, but one of my hometown friends showed me an article that came out in 2013. Apparently, some men kidnapped and sexually assaulted a girl my age. It wouldn't have scared me if it hadn't mentioned the white van, but man, still terrifying. My name is Clancy, and I live in a fairly small neighborhood. I moved to Apple Ridge City about 6 years ago when I was around 9. The neighborhood was built in the early 60s, so you can say the neighborhood was ancient. Being a teenager in the mid-90s was a job itself. Keeping yourself out of trouble and finding entertainment was difficult, especially when you're an only child. I had a small group of friends in the relatively small neighborhood: Anthony, Elias, and myself. To say we were inseparable would be an understatement. We were like brothers, and we were that close to one another that our families became close. Sure, there were other kids in the neighborhood, but all of them were bad apples. Not saying we were, but not as bad as them. House 113 was built around the same time as the neighborhood itself. I would say maybe a year after. The homeowners were an elderly couple that purchased the house in the late 60s, early 70s. They lived in the small home for nearly 30 years and slowly built a reputation for not liking teenagers. With each passing year, their hate for teenagers grew. Their home was targeted for egging and vandalism daily, until the incidents happened. Some of the teenagers in the neighborhood started to disappear. Slowly, one by one, each teenager vanished. The police were soon called and the investigation started. Some of the neighbors directed the police to the middle-aged couple. Soon, the police started searching the couple's property daily, and each time another teenager went missing. Since the police didn't have real evidence on the couple, the case went cold around the late 70s. Some of the neighbors suspected that the couple were the reasoning behind all the disappearance, but there wasn't any proof. So, being the dumb teenagers we were, we decided to ding-dong ditch their house. House 113 was in the far back of the neighborhood, surrounded by older, unused houses and trees, so this was a perfect cover-up. The home was at least 7 minutes away from the nearest home, so it would take us a while to get down there, but once we figured out the plan, we would execute it. We finally decided to meet up at around the small oak tree not that far from the trail leading to the house. The time we decided on was exactly 11, no more and no less. When 11 hit, I started walking towards the meetup spot. While I was walking, I started to have a little doubt in my mind. Ever got a feeling inside your gut telling you not to do something? That's feeling I had until I got to the meeting point. Once I got there, Anthony and Elias were waiting behind the small tree. "Finally, took you long enough, man," Anthony said, walking towards me. Yeah, I'm not scared, just took my time," I said back, while trying not to burst out laughing. While walking down the dirt road and with our only light source being the moonlight, with the house in view, we sat behind some bushes not that far from the house and decided who will go first. Elias decided to go first, and he slowly crept up to the old wooden door. He banged on the door 3 times and ran towards the side of the house. After 5 minutes of no one opening the door, I decided to take a swing. The smell of irony and must quickly filled my nostrils once I got towards the step of the door. I wanted to turn back and run home to the comforts of my house, but knowing my friends, they wouldn't let me live without teasing and taunting me about running away. Raising my fist, I banged on the door 4 times nice and loud. Turning back, I ran back towards the bushes and jumped into them, looking back at the door. Anthony, growing frustrated, he stood up from the bushes we were hiding in and walked towards the door. He banged on the door, almost knocking them off the hinges, and stood there just with his arms folded. I tried calling him to come back and let's just go, but he protested and waited. Elias stood at the front of the steps and leaned against the railing looking towards the door. And something I can't explain clearly even 20 years after the incident happened, the door swung open and 2 pair of red eyes stood in the darkness looking at Anthony. One long bony arm reached for him whilst he stumbled down the steps. Elias slowly backed up in shock and fear. A creature slowly emerged from the dark doorway. It had the head of a deer, but its skull was long and narrow, but its antlers took up half of its head and dried blood all over them. The thing reached for Anthony while he tried to crawl away, and hopped on his back and sunk his teeth into his neck. His screams were cut off by gurgling and flesh ripping. Elias snapped out of his daze and ran towards me. Pulling me up in the bushes, me and him ran down the dirt road, my lungs burning from running too fast. I looked behind me to see another one of those creatures chasing us. I turned my focus ahead and ran harder. While running, Elias tripped over a branch and fell towards the ground. Without looking back, I kept running as his yells for help were cut by growling and flesh ripping. With the first lamppost in view, a feeling of relief washed over me. Footsteps from behind me grew closer, but I couldn't stop running, and I wasn't going to. I ran towards the first house I saw and banged on the door frantically until the homeowner came out and started yelling at me for waking up their household. She called the police, and I was questioned multiple times by the police. I gave the same stories I told my parents and family. Nobody believed me. They all thought I was crazy. Nobody searched for my best friend's bodies. The neighborhood acted like they never existed. Not even their parents. I don't know what happened that night, but I wish it was a strange nightmare.